Race is a social construct, but racism is built in economics. Let me talk to you about it. Hey, folks, welcome to The Way I See It, which is my podcast on all things money, the economy, and finance. So, President Joe Biden signed into law Juneteenth. Essentially makes June the 19th a federal holiday in the United States of America. So, this is just another symbolic acknowledgement of the end of slavery and the emancipation of enslaved peoples, especially in the United States of America. But what really is slavery? So, slavery is about economics, not just racism. And I'll give you an example. If we have two companies, you have a company, I own a company, and I can produce goods cheaper than you, then I can outsell you. I can outsell you because my goods are going to be cheaper. If I outsell you, I get richer than you, I get wealthier than you. So if labor costs can be reduced or eliminated, it gives me a big advantage over the other competition out there in the market. Very important point to understand. And let's look at South Africa as a real life example. Well before the apartheid laws were passed, say in the 1920s, the price of gold crashed everywhere in the market in the world. And South Africa, of course, exports gold and diamonds. The way to retain the margins, because the prices of gold had come down, was to reduce the cost of doing or mining gold in South Africa. So the owners of the mines, who were white, had an idea. They were going to create this two-tier system where the blacks would earn a lower wage than the whites. That was already the practice, but they wanted to make more whites now earn a lower wage to make them, in quotes, the same as blacks in terms of earning a wage. And the whites in South Africa, the lower class whites that were employed in the mines, rebelled, what we call the Rand Rebellion. It was a big thing. It took almost 20,000 South African troops with the Air Force to curtail and bring that rebellion to a close. But that shook the South African government. And they were so spooked that they passed a law called the Mines and Works Amendment Act of 1926. It basically cemented color divisions in South Africa. It recognized white miners as superior to black miners. Those were the seeds of apartheid. It was an economic decision to separate the blacks because they could pay the blacks lower. And if they removed that cost of labor, then they could sell gold because then gold prices had crashed. So it was a decision taken to institute racism to ensure that the economics worked. This is the point we make. Racism is economic as well as a social construct. America itself, as we can argue, has run an economic apartheid system. Martin Luther King, Dr. King, fought for civil rights in America, and he won. He won the right for everyone to vote, for blacks to be judged on the content of their character and not just the color of their skin. But McKinsey, the global consulting superpower, did a study, and they found out, and I'm quoting, that the median annual wage for black workers was approximately 30% lower than that for white workers. So blacks make up about 12.9% of the population in the US, but only get about 9.6% of the total wages, right? And that they found out that's going to take about 220 billion in terms of annual parity between the whites and the blacks, just for them to catch up. That's if one party stood still. This is just the gap between both demographics. And we can go deeper into this. The US Federal Reserve Board conducts a survey of consumer finances every 3 years. Yeah. The last one was conducted in 2019. And the Fed found, and I'm going to just quote again, that the wealth gap between black and white families remain large. The typical Black family has about $23,000 of wealth as compared to the typical white family, which is about $184,000 in wealth. So white families are 13% more likely to hold the top 10% of wealth distribution as compared to just 1% of Black families. But let's talk about home ownership. Now, in America, you can take equity, i.e., if your house has a difference or if your house appreciates in value, you can borrow on that equity created by when you own that home. And home equity is the most important asset class for the middle class in America. So according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, at 15 trillion, homes are 16% of the total US wealth. And white homeowners retain a 73.1% of home ownership as compared to just 40.6% for blacks. So that's a big, big, big gap. And why is this important? Like I said, if you own a home, that's going to be your first place to go borrow funds at a cheaper rate, at a longer duration. So if you fall into unnecessary circumstances like COVID and you lose your job and you own a home, you could borrow, say, for 10 years with your home equity line of credit at a very, very low rate, and that could tide you over. But if you don't own a home, you literally have got to go into debt to tide you over. So, two responses in the same economy to different demographics will produce a different result. And that's what you see going on in America. Home ownership insulates you to a large extent from a fall in income because you can borrow on the value of your home. But if you don't own any homes, then you're just exposed to obtaining more credit or depleting your savings. And that's basically where you then run into that debt trap. So, how do we start to fix this economic slavery or economic apartheid that we have? Well, one thing to do is to start to look at specific laws in America. America has already banned redlining, which is basically you refuse a loan because the home or the applicant is a certain demographic or in a certain location, and those locations are deemed high risk. That's an implicit bias that creates a disparate outcome in that if you are then black or minority, you can buy a home. So America has banned those practices, you know, but that's not going to be enough. You simply cannot expect centuries, and I mean talking about centuries now, of those rules, of those laws that have created the economic slavery to simply go away by simply banning just one law or the other. So, similar to the Marshall Plan, where the US went to Europe and invested in Europe to counter communism, the US also has got to invest in America to counter economic apartheid. And I think a good way to start is through home ownership. The US has to have a deliberate policy to allow blacks and minorities to buy a home, to own a home. And how can they do this, for instance? Well, you could start off by saying if you're a minority and want to buy your first home, we would waive things like a credit score, we would waive things like a down payment. And the US government could say we're going to pay up to 75% of that home if you could pay, say 5% of the home. And you have to stay in the home for 10 years and you cannot sell the home. So it's you buy a home, it's yours, you're a minority, the government pays 75% of the home, you put up 5%. We're not going to deny you based on a credit score. The word here is equity. You want to erase the centuries of economic apartheid that has happened. There are many other ways you can do it. You could say if you sell your home and you're an American, no matter the color you are, but you sell to a minority, then the US will waive capital gains on that sale. So essentially, I could buy a home and the person could sell to me because if he sells to me, any profit that they make, the US government will waive that profit from being assessed a tax. That would open up more opportunities for me to buy a home because that's a calling card. Sell to me and pay no taxes. So there are tons of ways that the US can say we want to bridge the home ownership gap. Because, like we've said, if you own a home, that's going to be your cheapest way to build wealth, not just for yourself, but generationally. So you can transfer that wealth across generations. And that's going to be a very, very good start to remove the economic apartheid. We can't ignore Africa in all this. The problem really with Africa, and if you look at Haiti as an example as well, is debt. The Africans and the Haitians have been made to borrow, and the debt has accumulated. In many instances, the interest accumulated and capitalized is 3 times the amount of what the African nations actually borrowed. You cannot grow wealth if you are paying back interest in a foreign currency for years. Haiti got free centuries ago and had to pay over 100 years debt back to France. That sowed the seeds of what we have today, where they are impoverished. You have to go back and make equity count in Haiti and Africa. And a good place to do is to cancel all the debt that the Africans and the low income countries are currently owing. There is no moral hazard into this. That's just going to be a down payment to removing and eliminating the economic appetite that we see. Like I said, we've done it before. America has done the Marshall Plan. It bombed Italy and Germany and rebuilt it. There was no moral hazard argument back then. There should be more. No, there shouldn't be any now. We have to go simply beyond the hashtags and the sadness of what happened with George Floyd, and look at this as an opportunity to pass economic laws that would right the wrongs and bring equity into the picture. Not equality, equity. You have to look at the disparate and the demographics that cannot catch up if you allow them to simply go about their normal business. The gap is simply too wide for them. They need help, and the US government can help them to achieve that. And I'll end by saying literally, there can be no freedoms really until there is economic freedom. And I think it's a good way to invest in the future, not just of America, but of Africa. And the world will look back and say, we did a good thing. Thanks for listening, guys. Keep on Twitter, FinPlanCarlo Ajo1. Love you all. Take care.